It might have even been Discount was playing a show with us, and there was like a gunfight out there, and we had to like run and hide behind cars. It was like, I mean, it was like a crazy time.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, feel free to support the podcast if you've been listening for a while and want to do so by signing up on my Patreon over at patreon.com/thiswasthescene. It's just $1 a month, and that will kick ass. Against All Authority was established in Florida back in 92. Here's what Wikipedia had to say. Against All Authority were driven by a willingness to promote their message, questioning our economic differences and promoting our human similarities. A strong engagement in political and social issues is clearly evident in their lyrics. The band maintained a fierce DIY stance influenced by the approach of the Dead Kennedys and Subhumans. Early in their career, the band decided to book concerts, make recordings, and even produce band t-shirts on their own. Their first release was a 7-inch called Above the Law, which was released in 1994. Later, they signed to Hopeless Records, becoming one of their major bands. In addition to touring and recording, the band is frequently involved in demonstrations and social projects. They have also influenced a number of other bands. I've talked with these guys many times because I always tell the story about this show we played in New Jersey in a Legion Hall where these guys played with like Plan A, Siren 6, and a bunch of other bands. It was cool to finally get in touch with them because this is an interview I've wanted to do for a while. I even tell Joe that. And Joe is super fucking awesome. He's super laid back and just a really nice guy, so I really enjoyed this interview a lot, and I think that you will as well. So I got Joe on the Skype, and this is what we talk about. The upcoming punk rock museum, being a band from Miami, Florida, Hurricane Andrew's impact on the band, the Crumbs, Far Out Records, who did their artwork, where the Far Out Records logo came from, the bromance with Plan A Project, dealing with the cops, the band Onyx ripping them off, and a ton more. You can go support Joe by following his Instagram account, Koontz Guitars, Koontz Guitars, and buy a guitar or 5. This week's sponsor is Mint 400 Records. Mint 400 Records is an indie record label from New Jersey with bands across the United States, Canada, and Europe. The label features everything from indie rock and folk to post-punk and soul. Over 370 exciting releases. You can find Mint 400 Records releases streaming at Spotify, Pandora, Tidal, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Deezer, and more, or at all MP3 outlets worldwide. Visit mint400records.com for links and more info. Here's a clip from the song Fill Me Up by the band Swims. Definitely go check that out. Lastly, 2 more ways you can support the podcast. 1, you can donate one time at thiswasthescene.com. It's a purple button on the top of the page, on the homepage. 2, you can buy merch on thiswasthescene.com. I'm also doing limited release shirts, so if you want to sign up for that, there'll be a pop-up email box on the website. So just put in your email, and you'll be the first to know. You can also go follow my Instagram account, which This Was The Scene, so you can stay up to date on what's going on. I also do like random polls in my Instagram stories and get a lot of engagement. I also do teasers on Monday and Thursday if you want to know what's or who's going to be the upcoming guest. So that's a good place to go follow. And if you want to, you can just share that with people, and that's how it helps. You can find a teaser in my account and then like share it to your story and then tag me. That's super helpful. It's free, and it really helps spread the word because if you have a bunch of followers, then a bunch of followers see this, and then they can come over to my account and start following, and they can keep up and helps me grow the podcast, which is very much appreciated. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. As far as us meeting, we may have met in like 98 possibly. You guys played a show in Butler, New Jersey in a Legion Hall with...
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you guys played a hell of a lot of shows, so I don't know if you remember that one little one.
Was it with Plan A Project?
It was with Plan A. It was
Okay.
you guys were the headliner. I think it was either you or Plan A. I think it was you guys. And Siren 6 True Zero, this band called Spaz, who was a ska band, and then I was in a couple bands, but the original it was called Congress of Cow. It was like our first real Legion Hall punk show that we played before we started playing more of them. But it was like the first time I witnessed a real like show like that. And I've talked about it a lot in this podcast, especially with Dennis, because I interviewed him for talking about Plan A. But
Yeah.
that shows it was super small. It was really dark. There was a shit ton of kids packed in there. We were in the same room, but I don't think we conversed. I guess to answer your question.
Was this in like, I'm picturing some kind of like, I want to say a little strip mall kind of place that was like painted outside. I mean, I could be confused. I've been this, you know how it is. It becomes a blur, but I just have this picture in my mind of this place that was kind of just real close to the road.
Yeah, it was. I think you're right. I cannot, for the life of me, remember it. Yeah, someone listening is a lot of people are listening. Like, were at that show, so they probably be like, "Yeah, it was," but I
Yeah,
cannot remember.
they would chime in, but unfortunately they cannot right now.
Yeah, but I just remember that was. It's so cool to get this podcast is has been so much fun because there's so many conversations I've had with people that I had a question from when I was like 17 years old and I literally got to ask it now. 20
Wow.
years later, like a couple interviews where it would just be some random thing and I'd say to someone like, "What was that?" and they'd answer. I was like, "My God, I wanted to know this so long ago."
Yeah.
But to like talk to you is great because of playing with you guys, and that show was this giant milestone. And I'm just so excited to fucking talk to you about that time period.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you reaching out, and it's good to dust the cobwebs from my memory, because you're going to help me remember stuff. Because, man, the 90s, I don't remember shit, dude. you know?
Well, I mean, how when was like the last time you had a conversation like this with somebody in depth?
Um, that's a good question. It's definitely been a while. But I have been speaking with Danny lately, man. We kind of reconnected, and which I'm very grateful for. And he moved away, and we haven't spoken. We've spoken off and on, but we've been talking a little more lately. Which is kind of cool. And during the past week, and we were reminding ourselves of stuff, and it's like it's good to have a friend that was there with you or somebody that experienced it that can just like, hey, and you remember this detail, and it's like, oh my God, it's just like it pops into your head, you thought it was missing, but there it is.
How did you guys reconnect recently?
Oh, well, we were talking, we've been talking off and on for the past year or so, and just recently he had mentioned to me that, and I said, is this an official thing? Can I talk about it? Because I don't want to like just make shit up, because it sounds cool as hell. He was telling me about this punk rock museum that apparently is gonna happen in Nevada.
Okay.
Somebody's putting a real museum together. It will have punk through the different decades, and somebody had contacted him, the curator for the 90s, which is right up your alley.
Yeah.
Maybe this is something you could talk about on your podcast in the future. They reached out to Danny and they wanted to know if we would be interested in putting stuff into the museum, which, duh, yeah, let's put stuff in there. That's cool as hell. So we've been talking about it, and, I'm like, I'm not playing this Marshall. Maybe I'll just send that over there. Who knows? Maybe they'll put that in there. That'd be kind of cool. We'll see. So we've been talking about that kind of stuff, and he's been sending me a lot of flyers and our tour itineraries and stuff like that.
Oh wow.
And I was kind of looking around, and I'm like, let me see when we played in New Jersey, see if it rings a bell when we played with you guys. I saw a show when we played at the Pipeline. We played there once or twice, I'm sure. All I remember about that is somebody saying, okay, don't go too far that way. Don't go too far that way down the street, and be careful when you go down this block.
Yeah.
That's what I remember about the pipeline.
Yeah, I think that was in a sketchy part of town back
I
then.
think so. I think so. Yeah.
Do you still have? I'm gonna structure this where I'm gonna go back in time and talk about how you guys started the band and how you got in the scene and all that. But I kind of like I just want to stick here for a minute. Do you personally have any, besides Dennis sending you some flyers and things like that? Do you still have any t-shirts or stickers or buttons or anything from back then of you guys?
I do have some stuff. Yeah. I know Danny has a few things. I always try to keep like one of each shirt or something,
Oh wow.
just to have a memory of it. I got a few things in a box somewhere, and this was, obviously before cell phones, and I would always try to take snapshots, and whoever was touring with us, like our friend Devin would travel with us a lot and help us with merch and managing and stuff. I would be like, hey man, while we're playing, here's my camera, take some snapshots, so
Yeah.
I got a few memories like that, which is kind of cool because now it's like you don't even have to ask somebody to take a picture. You play a show and everyone's standing there with their phone. But back then it's like you're lucky if you had a photographer there, that's super cool. And if you had somebody, you had to take it upon yourself to like, hey, snap a few shots.
What do you think your reaction would have been if you played in front of, if you were back then and the crowd had the same technology, they had phones like that, and all of them were taking photos the whole time during the show? Like, what do you think that would have, how would have that have resonated with you when you were playing live?
Well, obviously, I think I would probably be like, man, look at these clowns, man. Like, let's dance. You know what I mean? But and that's what I go to a show now, and it's like that. It's definitely weird. I definitely was talking to Danny, and he sent me a picture of our first cell phone that we got for the band, like when phones first kind of became accessible.
Yeah.
And it was like this one of these old school looking burner phones. He still has it in this box over there, and he sent me a picture. He's like, dude, remember this phone when we got it? Because when we got it, we're like, oh shit, we got a cell phone. And it helped, to
Yeah.
like advance our shows and stuff and for emergencies. But we were like, man, don't pull it out because that's not fucking punk, dude. You're like a poser with technology. And we're laughing because we're like, and now you can't leave home, without a phone. Like, what is it? The fear of not having your phone is like nomophobia or some shit like that. It's like you gotta have it.
Yeah, sometimes when I go out, or when I was going out a year ago or so, I mean, I still go out now, but it's not, no bars are really open around here. I would sometimes leave my phone home and I'd start walking to a bar and just bring, because I have a comic that I do, so I always just doodle all the time. And I would be about a block or two from my apartment and start freaking out and be like, just gotta keep going, man. Just
Yeah,
got just gotta leave it
yeah,
home. And I feel
yeah.
like my head would be so clear after an hour or two because I'm not constantly checking shit all the time.
It's true, man. It's like what a different time. I mean, it's a great tool, but where did our brains go? It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, I can't remember. I used to call my buddies and just dial the number. Yeah, I don't remember anybody's phone number now.
I know. It's just like their name.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't. I know like my friends from growing up. I remember their phone numbers and my first phone number, but after that, it's like no, I've never remember.
yeah.
So let's kind of like go back in. I used to structure this with like and asking people what got them into music in general, but I started skipping that because I wanted to get into really what I think a lot of people are interested in learning is, for you guys, because you guys are from Florida originally, right?
Yes, we're all from Miami, Florida. We used to coin ourselves the southernmost punk rock band in the United States because we're basically on the tip of Florida. We all grew up down here.
I always thought you guys were from Gainesville because I thought that every awesome band from Florida came from Gainesville.
Yeah, well, I mean, it that you're right about that. There's a lot of like killer bands from there. And Florida always had, being in a peninsula, we're basically like an island that's attached to the land. A lot of bands would always be hesitant to come down on tour because you got to drive all the way down
Yeah.
and then you got to drive all the way back up, and it's 8 hours each way from the border, from where we're at. That's 16 hours. So Like the places people would hit are, if they did come south, they would hit Fort Lauderdale or Miami, Tampa on the West Coast. Gainesville is like a hot spot now, and Orlando as well. That's more central Florida. And then, Jacksonville on the way out, or Tallahassee or something, and they'd wrap around, and start going west.
I think that from knowing what it's like from back then, being on tour and driving into Florida and going to play in Tampa, and that's when we had our just a physical map in our hands.
Uh-huh.
And I remember we crossed the border and I was so excited and I'm doing the mile marker thing. And
Yeah.
I'm like, if this is correct, this is gonna take like 4 or 5 fucking hours to get to Tampa.
Yeah.
And then it did. And I think my mentality, and I was in a small band at the time, but I think this is just throwing it out there, but I think some people were like, dude, there's no fucking way we're going any further into the state because it's so
Yeah.
gigantic.
It's a dedication to come down and play a show in Miami. So being a band from down here in the 90s, not really having any contacts, we would basically use the Bible, which was maximum rock and roll. Once we started to play Florida, we started to play. One of our first out of town shows was in Tampa, St. Petersburg. And once we started to get around Florida, we're like, okay, we need to get out of the state. So that's how we booked our first tour, was with Book Your Own.
Book your own
Are you
fucking
allowed?
life.
You're allowed to curse on here? Is that
Yeah.
okay? Okay, so Book Your Own Fucking Life is what it was called, right? We would get around that way. Once we would leave Florida, we're like, man, that took a long time. It's just like, wow. And then the mentality was, it's not like when you live in the Midwest, you could say, oh, we're going to go over to the East Coast and come back home, or go to the West Coast and go back home. Once we left the state, we're like, okay, we're off this fucking peninsula. We might as well go around the whole United States. And our first tour was probably like 2 months long.
Oh
And
God.
we didn't know where we were going. There was no like contracts or anything. We did it all ourselves, and we basically were just like stealing and, trying to survive to the next show. Hey, we made it. We made it back.
Was that the first time you had left Florida?
I had left Florida before, but not like with my friends on this adventure like that.
Yeah.
And just trying to get out. We started playing in 92. Well, we were already friends before Hurricane Andrew. Hurricane Andrew was the
Oh
big
yeah, that's right.
Category 5 hurricane that hit bullseye right in our hometown. We were already hanging out, me and Danny Lore. We were already like, dude, let's start a band. Maybe we could get out of here. And we were already writing songs. We were like, man, we need to start a band that it's like Operation Ivy and the Subhumans, and we just love the Clash and all these different bands, and Dead Kennedys. And when the hurricane hit, we were about 2 or 3 months without electricity down here. But we wrote a lot of our songs during that period because we would just hang out and write our songs like on acoustic guitars. We were just like kind of developing our first album, our first 7-inch.
Were you guys like going to shows down there first, or did you just know of punk rock and ska and all that because of just hearing of these bands and like buying their albums?
We would go to shows. Danny is maybe like a few years older than me. The big club down here was on South Beach called the Cameo Theater. And that's where a lot of the 80s punk bands would go. The Dead Kennedys, GBH, The Exploited, you name it. All these bands would go to the Cameo Theater. And that was on South Beach. Then there were other clubs around. Danny was a big part of that scene. I was just kind of like starting to scratch the surface. I was like still in my younger teens and I lived pretty far south. I couldn't get down to that area. And then I started going to local shows that were closer to me. I remember one of my first shows was the UK Subs in the late 80s. That was a really cool show. That opened my eyes, to like, wow, this is what I love this. I remember seeing Fugazi play at the Cameo Theater. That was just incredible.
Did you see, like, when you saw that though, when you saw that band, did you think to yourself, I want to do this, or I just want to be a person who goes to shows and just stays in the crowd?
I think I felt a place where I felt comfortable and that I wanted to belong to it. That's how I felt. That's how I felt when I went to see the UK subs.
What was it about that that spoke to you? Like, because I know a lot of people they weren't getting the thing that they felt there was something I think in a lot of people that they knew was there, and until they went to a show, they felt this thing, and when they went to a show, they're like, oh my God, I found the thing.
That's the thing, you go to a show when you're a kid, and that's like, it's almost like getting caught up in a church with religion and dancing and just, it's this exuberance of Jubilee. You're like, wow, man, look at these people. And they're screaming about shit that I can relate to. That was it. I was hooked. Even though, hey, I almost got my ass beat by the skinheads at my first show. That was in the 80s. And we started the band after the hurricane. There was not really many venues down here that were doing all ages shows. So I remember we went to a club that I actually lived down the street from and is a post office now. I go in there all the time, and I'm always like, man, I used to rock this club. But it's like, and
It's awesome.
but we would go there. I remember we went to this club, and it was a movie theater that they would show the Rocky Horror Picture Show and stuff. And I remember going there with Danny, and we went to the guy who ran the club, and we said, hey, man. And I don't know how he believed us. He probably didn't. And he just like humored us. We're like, hey, we're promoters, and we want to do like a punk night here. And the guy was like, okay, cool. You could have from 7 to 11 before the club opens. And he gave us 3 Fridays in a row.
Wow.
And we didn't know what we were doing, and we went out and we rented like our own PA system that was like a piece of shit, but we rented it. We got there early, we set it all up, and we had 3 bands every night before this club, 3 Fridays in a row. And we had a lot of cool bands down here. There's a band called the Crumbs from down here that was our friends. They were like a punk rock, rock and roll style. A band called Cavity that's well known in the doom scene, and just they were real heavy and stuff. And we just like booked our friends' bands down here, and we did it ourselves.
I'm surprised you guys kept it to three because every other place in America would do like 7 or 10 and cram them
Well, that's
on the
now.
bill.
That was us trying to figure out how to do it. It worked out. It worked out pretty well, and we really got a lot of kids out to the shows, man. We were in awe by the 3rd Friday in a row how hungry the kids were to go to a show. Like the line was like down the street. It was like incredible,
How
and it
like
re- it
no, sorry,
really
go on.
boosted this. No, and it really boosted the scene for us down here.
How accepting was the scene to bands down there? Because a lot of spots, I'm imagining that once it's put in front of your face, you're so excited, and then it sticks around for a while, and you get used to it, and then all of a sudden people start having opinions and start judging, right? Because I know in Jersey we'd have the crowd. I loved the scene in Jersey, but if you were a beginning band, you'd have the arm folders in front of you, just kind of like impress me. What was
Yeah,
that like for you guys down in Miami when you were building that scene?
man, I don't. Maybe I was just young and naive, but I just felt like we all kind of accepted and supported each other, even though we were different styles too. And that's one thing we would run across. Like we would have our critics of, oh, this band has horns, like that sucks. I think we made up for that with our punk rock ethic, and our music was fast. And I think and their friends, even though they would critique us, they'd be in the crowd too, man. And we would all support each other. Like, you can't get any more different than Against All Authority and the band Cavity. I don't know if anyone out there listening is familiar with the band Cavity, but we were buddies. We would play together and hang out. It was like having a bill with Black Sabbath and the Specials. It was like a cool combination, and I think that diversity would just really brought out a lot of cool bands that are around now to this day.
Well, I feel like you guys had a tough enough sound that you could get away. Like you weren't the polished ska band. that ska was like, I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm totally wrong with this, but ska was a part of it, but you guys just had more of an edge where I think that people wouldn't give you shit, I guess, for being a ska band.
Yeah, well, I always want to say that we would say this to ourselves. We'd always say, we're too punk for the ska scene, and we're too ska for the punk scene. Meaning that it was a good and a bad thing. Meaning that we did a lot of tours. For example, we would tour with Less Than Jake. They're like our Florida buddy band. We could play with these ska bands and stuff like that. And we all kind of came up together, and we're still friends with those guys. Or we could tour with GBH. I mean, you can't get any more punk than that. So it was kind of cool to be able to do those type of things. You go on different tours with different bands. Yeah, I don't know. Just kind of, I hit a wall. Sorry.
That's okay. Now, how long were you guys playing before? Because your first release was Destroy What Destroys You, and then you did the split with Anti-Flag, or what came first?
The first thing we did was, it's called the Above the Law 7-inch, which had 4 songs. And then that appeared on Destroy What Destroys You. We added those songs at the end of Destroy What Destroys You.
That was on Far Out Records, right?
Yeah, that was on Far Out Records, and that was a record store that was in Fort Lauderdale, which is about an hour north of us, and they put out a lot of local bands. They put out the Crumbs, that maybe you've heard. They were on Lookout Records.
I remember the Crumbs. I remember hearing about the Crumbs.
The Crumbs were like our punk rock and roll band from down here, and we all kind of grew up skateboarding and hanging out together. I went to high school with some of the guys. That was when Far Out Records was putting out a lot of cool bands in the area. They were the place where they were a tiny little record store, but they would book shows. It was like our little central hub. They came out to the shows, and they really liked us. And then in the future, we ended up having one of them, who owned the record store, was Tim and Lisa Farout. Tim ended up joining the band with us, and he was playing trombone. We had this thing where like, oh, you play the horn, just join the band, like we didn't know a lot of punk rockers that played the horn.
Yeah.
And, they weren't all that good, you know what I mean? So maybe you could hear it on some of our recording, but I think we pulled it off. It was a learning experience.
Yeah, I'm looking this up right now. So Far Out, I interviewed Ryan from Discount, and I think he probably, yeah.
Ryan, all those guys, we would play shows with them all the time. We would play outside of the record store. They would do shows there. And it might have even been Discount was playing a show with us, and there was like a gunfight out there, and we had to like run and hide behind cars. It was like a crazy time playing these shows out there, and we just had a really good time. There was a bar right next to the record store, there was like a little outdoor area in this building where they rented these spaces, so we would do the shows right out there. I mean, I don't even think we asked the building if we could do it. We just fucking did it.
How well were you guys received in the beginning? Because I'm looking at your track record and how many albums you got out, and you were only on Far Out for a minute, and then you got on Hopeless, which I'll talk about in a second. You guys have so many records out, or you put out a good amount of releases out. You had the splits. You did a split with Less Than Jake. You did a split with Anti-Flag. So, like, how long did it take you guys from when you started playing to where you felt that crowds were really gravitating towards you and you were starting to kind of blow up?
I mean, I felt like, looking back, I almost feel like people were hungry for this type of music. They were just hungry for this energy, because I just feel like since we began, it just kind of just started growing at such a natural pace that before we knew it, we're like, man, I think we have enough fans that we could kind of hit the road and go around and try to do this. Even though we really didn't know, we didn't have that technology that says, hey, you got this many listeners in this city. We just kind of hit the road. And that's what opened our eyes, is when we hit the road and we go to a town that we've never been to in the middle of the United States, and there's kids up front jumping on stage and screaming the lyrics in the mic, and we're like, damn, how do they know our song? It was just a great feeling.
How did they know the lyrics if you guys are on Far? Like, did Far Out have a lot of reach?
We had cassettes. We would send out cassettes. Far Out would send records to different stores. People were buying the records. They were buying the 7 inches. It was more noticeable on the second tour we did. Our first tour was in '95. By '96, that's when we had already kind of went around and spread our music. Being out for 2 months, we would hit up all the record stores in every city. We would go to these record stores. We would put our records on consignment. When we came back around, we definitely had way more people at the show.
What did you personally want to get out of being in the band when you started?
I think we all wanted to escape Florida. We wanted to get out of our home life and just kind of get around.
Was there certain scenes or states that stood out to you in '95 and '96 where when you got back home, you were thinking, or not when you got back home, when you were going back out, you thought, all right, we have to hit here because we have such a great response from that scene?
I want to say yes. I mean, a lot of that was a blur now. Looking back, it's hard to remember what city, especially without my buddies here to remind me. I know that we would have we had, and we still have these somewhere. We had our big atlases, our road atlases, and we would write down in there like, oh, this show was killer, and we definitely make it a point to go back and hit that place again. And we would make contacts as well, take people's numbers down and be like, hey, we're going to book a show next time, so we'll keep in touch.
When you guys, the first couple of records you guys have, and I want to talk about how you transitioned from Far Out to Hopeless, but you had the same artwork. It looked like it was the same person who did the artwork.
Yes, this artist, his name is Omar Angulo. You guys should check out his artwork. He's an awesome artist, and he was a big part of our scene down here, a good friend of ours, and he was into that type of really cool comic drawing, and he did our first 7-inch, which was kind of like, if anybody has that 7-inch, it kind of reads itself like a comic book. If you see the front cover, you see the kids in the front getting harassed by the cops, and then the whole back cover is like a whole nother story. Also, the inside, we did that ourselves. We kind of wrinkled up a map of Florida from where we're, right, the city we're from, and we lit it on fire. And we had a friend that worked at Kinko's, so we would color copy that. That's how we kind of made our artwork, collage work and stuff like that. And I took a turn. What were we talking about?
We were talking about the artwork.
The artwork, yeah. Omar Angulo. So then he did the follow-up, which was Destroy What Destroys You. He did just about everything except our last release.
Yeah, it looks like he did Above the Law, Destroy What Destroys You, All Fall Down, 24-Hour Roadside Resistance.
Yeah, he did that as well. All Fall Down was really cool because he did the cover on that. That was our first release on Hopeless, our second record, our full-length record. And what's cool about that is he did the cover art for that, but the back cover and the insert of the record was done by Jesse Michaels from Operation Ivy.
Wow.
So that was a big deal for us because we had met him at a skate park down here. We played a show, and I guess he was living in Fort Lauderdale at the time. Came out to the show, and we got to speak to somebody who we really looked up to, and it was just even cooler that he did some artwork for us.
So you guys ran into him at a show, and was it were you guys playing and you met him, or how'd that happen?
He was he had met some of the punk rockers in the scene, and word was going around that he's been hanging out, and we're like, man, you should bring him to the show. And I think that's how he ended up there. We played at a really cool skate park. We didn't have many skate parks down here. It was one of the first ones. It was in a warehouse district, and I remember we played right on the half pipe, like a stage. He was in the crowd, so it was just really cool to have somebody who influenced us at one of our shows.
Did you know he was in the crowd when you were playing?
I don't remember that.
I was gonna say, because that might have had a little bit of effect, maybe, on you playing and being like, holy shit, or I don't know, maybe your mentality is like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, I really don't. It's hard to remember back, I'm sure that I know we met him and spoke with him at the show, so Maybe it was after we played or before. I can't really remember that detail.
Wait, this is the skate park. This is in Miami, or was this the one in Tampa?
This is in Miami, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember there was a skate park in Tampa that you played on the half pipe too.
Oh yeah,
I remember
I
that.
think so. Yeah, there was definitely there was a. I mean, I think we played on many half pipes in our history. You know, it makes for a stage.
So I'm looking at your artwork is on Discogs, which is cool. Like if you click on it, it has more images. So for Destroy What Destroys You, you got the cover with a guy with a gun in his mouth, and then you have the back. And I remember the Far Out Records logo was like the dude pointing a gun.
Yes, that started off as a joke on our first 7 inch, because if you look inside of our first 7 inch, there's a little, on top of the map that we burned and wrote the lyrics on top of. There's a little cutout of, and I don't know how, I probably got it from like an encyclopedia set of these like four Boy Scouts walking with a flag, and I just kind of like drew over it and put against all authority in the flag. And then I took one of them and I drew a goatee on it and made it look like Tim, which was who ran Far Out Records, and we put that on the back for Far Out Records. And then that just took off into, if you look at the back of the first 7 inch, you'll see the first time we drew Tim on there. And it was like from like some little Boy Scout cutout that I cut out of the encyclopedia set. And we just kind of would do collage art on the Xerox machine. And then from there, that turned into a whole different thing of, there's different little versions of that. That one is the original, the one on our first 7 inch.
Yeah, this one you look at it's him running with a flag that says
Yeah,
Far Out.
that's with the flag. Yeah, that's it right there.
That's funny.
And then Omar drew one. Omar Angulo drew the one where he's holding the gun on the back of Destroy What Destroys You.
Yeah, that's like the front of it is that. I remember just seeing that as a kid. I mean, this is like also the time I'm 16, 17 years old. So that was the one thing about the whole punk scene is that I was interviewing this guy, Jeff Kish, who was in this band called Dawson High.
Uh-huh.
And he said something to me that it kind of stuck with me since he was listening to, I think, Sex Pistols. And he goes, Johnny Rotten, I think it was Sex Pistols. He's like, Johnny Rotten swore, and he goes, and here I am, 13 or 14, listening to this and thinking, like, God, this is like dangerous.
Yeah.
That's like the kind of thing I got when I saw your guys' artwork was it just drew me in because it looked like scary.
Well, I mean, Omar did paint a pretty. I mean, he's a great artist, and you could just see it through. I think that's what he was trying to get, that reaction through his artwork. It's not easy being a punk rocker during that era, especially here in South Florida. It was just like having a target, like, hey, come and fuck with me and mess with me and kick my ass. So yeah, I did have a lot of punk rock friends that did have guns. So that was just part of, not that we're going around, no one was really going around gangbanging. It was more like, okay, well, we got some muscle too. Fuck you.
Jesus. This is such a like a side that's like a great direction to go and to stick with. But I thought that just I've been wanting to ask this because I saw this and I'm gonna talk about Hopeless and all that. But so for Omar in your thank you list, you thank Omar I draw slow.
Is that what it says?
Yeah, was he like super slow at drawing or something? Or I don't know.
That was probably Danny making a thank you list and sassing Omar for having to wait for him to do the artwork. We're probably like, dude, you need to draw that for us. You're just messing with our friends.
So you guys you're on Far Out for, by the way the internet says it, you're on there for about 3 years and then you put out your full length All Fall Down on Hopeless. Is that right?
Yeah, we toured into California every time we would go on tour. You want to play in LA, you want to play in San Francisco, and all along the way. There's a great scene in California. A lot of our favorite bands are from there. When we would play there, we did become really good friends with Falling Sickness. I don't know if you remember those guys.
Yeah, I remember.
Right away, we just hit it off with those guys. And we did a tour. We've done a tour of the U.S. with them, and we did a tour of in Europe with those guys as well. And I remember Gabe, the singer, may he rest in peace. He said, "You guys should just join the family, man. You guys got to be on Hopeless with us." And that's how we ended up on there. We just kind of were ready for it. Even though, Tim ran the label, I think we were ready for something else. We did get, later on, I did find out that we were asked to be on Fat Records, and at one point we were asked to be on Epitaph. Prior to that, they were looking for bands. This is before the big 90s boom, with the Offspring and everything. We kind of missed that window. I wasn't as involved, and I can't remember all the details of what went down. And I don't want to say anything negative about anybody, but I was really young at the time too, so I think we missed that window. When we were approached by Hopeless, they would come to all our shows. I remember meeting Lewis, the owner of Hopeless Records, in Corona, California, I believe, at the Showcase Theater. And I remember them coming out and being like, "Hey, we're huge fans of you guys, and we really love you guys on the label." And we were just, "Hey, what do we got to lose, man? Let's do it. Let's put out some music with these guys," which led to All Fall Down, which is probably one of our best known records.
Yeah.
To some people, they think that's our first record because they haven't heard Destroy What Destroys You. That one's kind of rare, and it's out of pressing. It's not on Spotify or anything.
Yeah, I saw that. I was looking up all your records and it's not on there.
Yeah. So, if you're gonna hear Destroy What Destroys You, you either have to have the cassette, the CD, or the vinyl. When we did All Fall Down, that was many people's first impression of us. And we were lucky enough to record that in Los Angeles at West Beach Recorders, which was where a lot of the Bad Religion and a lot of the West Coast bands would record there. So we just felt, really honored to be able to put out a record like that and record in a place like that. It was a good time.
So real quick, I know that anytime a band can't find their record, they're like you said, you have to have it on tape or 7-inch or CD. But actually, I just looked it up on YouTube, and the record looks like it's on there, scattered.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you could probably hear it on YouTube. Yeah. There's songs that are definitely, yeah.
Yeah, No Reason, Lifestyle Rebellion, Walking
We had a
Revolution.
lot there. We must have had over 20 songs on the first release.
Yeah, dude, you have a shit ton of songs on there.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
there's because we also we said, fuck it, let's put this, I don't know how we made this decision, but we added our first 7-inch onto that release as the last 4 songs.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, I mean, it's easy to, not easy, but the majority of the songs are like a minute 30. So you have like a lifetime kind of approach to how
Yeah,
long your songs
yeah,
are.
yeah, definitely. They're short songs.
What was the feedback or like what was the reaction for people when you guys got on Hopeless? Like the crowd, not you guys internally, but everyone around you.
The crowd, meaning at the shows?
Yeah, like what was I mean, because everyone has an opinion, especially back then they had a real fucking opinion about selling out or what was considered selling out. Like what was the big enough label where you were still punk rock and but you were like it was
That was
accepted, you know?
yeah, and that's, when you look back at that, it's that, you just think, I mean, I get it, like there's bands like Fugazi that did things their way, and it's just like, my hat's off to them. Not everybody could do that type of thing. I think that locally, some of our friends might have been like, dude, you guys are like, look at you, you're sellouts. But, in the long run, they're helping getting your music out, and we just reached a broader audience. That's when we started to see some growth for us as far as fan base and acceptance. We even went to Europe, and we were just like, wow, people know our songs here too. This is great.
What kind of tours did you guys get on after that? Did you see, because it seems like prior to that you were already touring with awesome bands. Did you see a bit of a jump in the size of a band you were playing shows with now, like after that?
Yeah, this is where it gets hard for me to remember what bands we would tour with. I remember the last tour of the 90s, I think it was 99, I think was with GBH, okay? And we also toured with Conflict. That was a pretty big tour. You know, we had a lot of fans coming out there too. Obviously for GBH and Conflict as well. We did we toured twice already with Les and Jake. Even our first tour, actually, I have to say, maybe like 3 tours, because our first tour we played a couple shows with Les and Jake. We would run into each other. Also in the 90s, we would tour with, man, we did a lot of tours with a lot of bands that it's incredible. It's hard to remember everybody. I wish I had a list in front of me that I could. We met Anti-Flag
Yeah.
at one of our first shows on our first tour. We met them in Texas. We did not have a show that day. We were touring with Book Your Own Fucking Life, and the show fell through in Texas. I think it was in El Paso. I'm not really sure. And Tilt was the headliner at a show that night. It was the Queers. It was Anti-Flag, the Queers, and Tilt. So we just showed up at the show, and we're like, man, can we please jump on the show?
Oh, wow.
They were super cool. That's what I really enjoyed about the punk scene, is how everybody would kind of support each other. And they were straight up. The Tilt said, hey, this is our show. This is the lineup. And we don't care if you jump on stage after everything is done and play. Fuck it. And they gave us a chance to go up there. Not that like it didn't have that oh, we're headlining kind of vibe, you know. It was
Yeah,
like people
like an
would
after hours.
people were trickling out, and I remember playing, and there wasn't that many people in the audience, but I remember all the Anti-Flag dudes were there at the front of the stage, and when we were done, we're like, man, we really liked your band, and we're like, yeah, we really liked you guys too. We never heard of them either, and we just had an instant bond with those guys. We're like coming from the same place.
Was it the time they were playing Die for Your Government?
Yeah, this was Die for Your Government when they were a 3-piece.
Jesus.
Yeah, they were just a 3-piece at the time.
So you guys didn't know who they were. They didn't know who you were. You liked each other, and then you end up putting out a split 7-inch together.
Yes, exactly. We did not know them at all. The same thing happened with when we played with the Pissed. We played with the Pissed and put out a split 7-inch with those guys. Les and Jake, we put out a split with them, but we knew them already. We each did a cover. They did Hungry Like the Wolf, and we did Centerfold by the Jay Giles Band.
That's
And
awesome.
then we each had an original. That was just great to always be able to do a split, and we really focused on that too. We always wanted to do a split with these bands that were our friends. You know, we did a split with the Criminals. We did a split with Jesse Michaels' band, Common Rider, on Hopeless Records, or was
Wow.
it Subsidy Records?
Yeah, Subsidy. That was like a non-profit. Their non-profit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was cool, you know, to always be able to do these splits with bands that we respected, and we had some really cool bands on Hopeless. I remember when Dillinger 4 joined Hopeless Records. You know, we played a show with them in Fort Lauderdale here, or in Miami. I think the show got canceled, and we were touring with those guys, and we already knew them from playing Minneapolis, because some of them would worked up at the record store, Extreme Noise, and they did shows for us there. And we met all those guys, and when they would tour, we would help them out and play shows down here. And I remember when we played in Miami here, we were like, man, why don't you guys join Hopeless Records with us? Because we're about to record with them. And then they did their Midwestern songs, you know, that first album they put out
Holy
on there.
shit. Yeah, that was the first time, because prior to that they were just putting out like a shit ton of 7-inches all the time.
Yeah, they did a lot of they did maybe 1 or 2 splits with a band called The Strike. You know, there was some really cool bands back then. my memory is starting to work now. Thank you. You're speaking about it is helping me here.
It threads it out, man. It just like
Yeah,
little
man.
little key things leads to another thing and another thing and
Yeah,
another thing.
yeah. Sparking some memory here.
So I reached out to Dennis, and since you're talking about touring, I said, "Hey, man, I got Joe on. What kind of questions would you ask?" And a couple of them I already asked, but he had this one, and I'm gonna ask this. You don't have to answer it, or if you do, I can edit this out, just because of it seems like the nature of what he's asking.
Yeah,
He goes, "Ask him about."
that is. I don't know if I can answer that.
Yeah, so I was like, I'm just gonna ask it, but
Yeah,
again, I don't want to put
that's
anything that's
that's a good.
incriminating.
That is. I don't even know about that.
Figured,
But
of
I
course
I
you'd
do
ask me
I
that.
do want to say this. I want to give a huge shout out to Plan A Project. I love those guys.
Yeah, I'm leading into that now. So how did you guys connect and why did you guys become? Because I was like you and them were like to me back then were synonymous as the bands that were like buds.
When we met Plan A Project, I had the same feeling, and we met them on the same tour that we met Anti Flag. Okay,
Oh,
we had a 1968 school bus that was painted green, that was emptied out, and we had purchased that somehow from somebody who made like almost like was turning it into like an RV. Like this thing was like a piece of junk that was kind of hollowed out inside. And we built it out. We had some friends, I'll say Brad Helton and Tom Sheridan, who was on house arrest at the time. They had the bus in front of their house and they built it out for us. Okay. And Tim Far Out funded the operation for that. And we built this school bus that broke down all over the United States. Okay. And we were lucky to have Brad with us. He was a mechanic, and he basically fixed that tin can with hand tools all over the US because we would break down. He was a certified mechanic. And on that tour, in that bus, we played with some incredible bands. So back to Plan A Project. We met those guys. I think it was at ABC No Rio in New York City. That must have been like 95. And we were playing a show with them. I think the Blanks 77 was also on the show.
okay.
And it was one of those things that when we played with them, we instantly were like, man, these guys are on the same wavelength as us, like we just felt connected, we didn't know them. And that was it. That was, we were friends, instant.
How many times did you guys go out on the road together? Or did you guys just meet up? I forget what Dennis said.
The, with
Plan A.
Plan A,
Yeah.
we, one time they came down here we did a pretty good tour. They came down. Danny started his own record label called Records of Rebellion. He released Plan A on his record label. And I think that's what we did. The Anti-Flag split is on that as well. And a couple of the splits that we did was on Records of Rebellion. I remember going on the road with Plan A. They came down to Florida, and just a funny thing happened where we had Danny Lore lived way down south, and he kind of lived in like this very sketchy area. The property was pretty big, okay, and it was overgrown with sawgrass, okay, and sawgrass is this. It just looks like these really high. They're like these really high blades of grass that could almost grow. It's almost like a cornfield, okay. You could get lost in it if you walk back there. So we had cut a path in this sawgrass and we had a secret shed. That's where we would practice. There was a shed on the property, and we would practice back there. And I remember Plan A Project, they parked their van out there. We were doing something. I forget what it was, but I guess their muffler was real hot. And we were like, man, it smells like smoke or something. And we had just gotten back, and there was like smoke everywhere. And I guess their muffler ignited and
Oh,
started like a
jeez.
small fire, and we had to run out and put that out. it was just like, they almost didn't make it out of Florida. These guys they almost lost their van. And that tour, we went all the way up and down the East Coast, I think, all the way back up towards Jersey.
Yeah, he had asked me about he wanted me to ask you about the bus. That's funny that you talked about that too.
And I appreciate Dennis reaching out, man, and connecting us. It's really awesome that I'm able to do this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. No, I mean, I had it on my I had a list of bands that I wanted to reach out to. I could swear. Let me just look this up real quick. This will probably, let's see. I had like, yeah, I made a list in the very beginning to a couple bands to reach out to, and then I kept adding to it. And I forget when I put you guys on. Yeah, I put you guys on for season 2. I wanted to, because that thing is like, I never know how to find bands, but then I realized is there's band pages on Facebook and accounts on Instagram.
Yeah.
And all you got to do is like, if you message somebody, sometimes it gets lost in like the inbox. So then if you comment on a post, it automatically gets thrown up in their feed, and I'll be like, hey, I messaged you. So there's all these messages out there, but I think I tried to reach out, and Dennis was like, yo, could I hook you up with Joe? I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Please do.
Well, it's great. We still keep in touch. Danny, Laura, and I. It's nice that every now and then I'll hear from. I've heard from Dan in the past. Dan from Plan A, Dennis as well, and it's just cool to reconnect now with social media. It just makes it a lot easier to find people.
I feel like every story I heard about you guys, or anytime I heard of your name back then, there was never any drama connected to it. It seemed like everyone always just had just good things to say. And this is just in passing, or if your band came up, it's like, oh, that band kicks fucking ass. Or there was never any stigma attached to you guys.
Well, that's just fucking nice, dude. I mean, let me tell you, I think that we would always put out a good vibe. I'm sure there's people that don't like us, maybe have negative things to say, but hey, if we stayed at your house and we would be so appreciative that we would wake up and cook breakfast or wash the dishes or do something, we just really always appreciated that.
Well, it's just funny that you guys had, I mean, this is my perspective, but my viewpoint, but from never hearing anything bad about you guys, the theme of you guys' band was just like pretty, obviously against all authority. It's like pretty aggressive in one direction of where you guys stand. Like, was that like putting out the records, or in like all of your artwork is very obviously cop like as the enemy driven and all that. Is that something where you would just keep that as a conversation in the lyrics and the songs you wrote, or did you guys have that be when you're driving in a van where you guys just were focused on what was going on around you, and that would be kind of like the worlds you lived in with what you focused on just outside of playing shows?
Well, I will say that, we did have a lot of cop harassment, especially growing up down here. And I'll say that, I have a friend that he is a police officer, and I respect what he does. And I see him as a friend before anything. And I know that a lot of police officers, I'm not going to say all cops are bastards, because I don't think everyone is an asshole. But I know there are out there, and I'm sure there's plenty of them. But we did deal with a lot of cop harassment growing up here. We've had guns pulled out at us. We've been threatened. I myself as well. And on the road, let me tell you, we've had some scary times where, I mean, I remember playing in Crofton, Maryland. We had an incredible show there that the kids put together at the last minute. We went to a VFW hall, and we showed up at this VFW hall. We're getting ready to load and play, and it just so happened there was a wedding going on there. And we're like, what the fuck? And there was, a lady in her wedding gown and so forth. So the show, and they were freaking out. Like, look at all these punk rockers out here, right? So they moved the show to a park in the middle of the woods with a generator. And let me tell you, we're playing, and out of nowhere, I mean, just police everywhere. And all you could hear were batons and bones crashing into each other.
Holy shit.
People running through the woods. We just kind of like, well, where are we going to run with all our equipment? So we kind of got surrounded. We had a police escort with our green bus that was on the green bus tour. We got escorted out of town. And I remember we tried to pull off to get gas. And when we pulled off, the cop, there was maybe like 5 police cars surrounding us. They pulled off with us, and they just said, hey, you're not stopping and getting out here. You're getting escorted out of town. You're going to keep driving. We're like, we're going to run out of gas. They're like, we don't care. We just had to
Wow.
keep driving. Danny Lore had a lot of fuel for his lyrics, that's for sure.
It's amazing to me that when a band, like I said, where there's the surrounding story that again that I heard was that you guys are just super cool guys. It's weird that shit like that surrounds people that are chill. I just don't understand that. Not saying it's like, no, I'm not questioning it. It just blows my mind,
Yeah. Well,
like
hey, look
that you guys had to deal with shit like that.
look at the state we're in now, It's almost like we were singing about it as it was like leading up to this.
It's weird, man, because I was looking for any videos of you guys playing on YouTube, which there are a couple, but there's a video by, remember the band Onyx?
Yes.
Slam, Let
Yes.
the Boys Be Boys song?
Yeah.
There's a video by them called Against All Authority, against the name of the song. And so the video starts with just like all this police harassment and shit, and it's crazy. So I'm thinking, and the video is from like 2015, so I was like, holy shit, these guys, like your band, like put this video out then. And then it was so
Yeah.
relevant to today, but then it's Onyx, and I was like, oh,
I remember
that's weird.
seeing what's funny about that is that you say that is I about a few years back I came across that and I was like, what the fuck? And even the artwork is emulating the artwork from that's a direct ripoff from Against All Authority, because if you look at their the artwork for that, they have like a little Cupid doll that's like a cop that looks like a pig. All that was already drawn by Omar, but it was like changed in a way, and it's just incredible that
Oh, wow.
I mean I you could put both of them next to each other and say, holy shit, look at the comparison. So much that I was like, man, I don't know if I should reach out to Onyx and say, hey, what the fuck are you doing ripping our shit off? Or, hey, fucking awesome, man, that you guys really like our artwork, right on. We feel the same way,
You
which
should.
is incredible. But yeah, it's out there. If any of you guys look that up, you'll see they have a song Against All Authorities, right?
Yeah.
And then they have all this artwork that goes along with it. If you look at that artwork and then you look up our first 7-inch, which is, what's it called? We Won't Submit, our first 7-inch.
Yeah.
You'll see, if you look on, especially on the back cover, there's a poster on the wall where the punk rockers are sitting they're sitting up against the wall before they're gonna get beat up by the cops. You'll see there's a little poster on the wall that says "Kids versus Pigs," and it looks just like the artwork. Yeah, it's like whoever did that artwork was definitely an Against All Authority fan.
I'm on Google right now. I'm looking at the images. There's like a cocktail. It's like a Molotov cocktail and a hammer and a cop
Yeah,
head.
there's a Molotov cocktail. They ripped that off. Okay, they ripped off the Molotov cocktail, which is from a different. Which, okay, here he goes. That's why we're not upset, because the Molotov cocktail we took from that is on our split with the Pissed. If you look up our split with the Pissed, we have a Molotov cocktail on the cover. That's on Records of Rebellion. That Molotov cocktail is like some kind of German impressionist like art that we took. But then it's like they stole that from a stolen artwork. You know what I mean? It's like it goes on and on. It's
Oh
like
yeah. Wait, I'm looking at the pissed artwork. Oh my God, that is a fucking direct
it's the
ripoff.
same shit. I'm
It's the
telling you.
same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy shit, dude.
So whoever the artist is,
Wow.
hey, I didn't know, and that's cool because, and I thought a lot about it, because didn't Onyx have that song with the hardcore band Biohazard called Slam or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, hey, these guys are like punk rock hardcore too. Fucking A. Right on, dude.
That's
We're singing
wild.
about the same shit. Let's get the word out.
It's so funny. I just randomly stumble across that video and it just opens up the door to like this story. Or like, that's nuts, dude.
Yeah.
That's so fucking wild.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Well, Fox, I just want to just cram a couple questions before I let you go. When you guys like finally broke up and disbanded, and left Hopeless, or was there ever like a final breakup, and was there a final breaking up with Hopeless, or did it just kind of just fizzle out?
I think we just kind of, fizzled out. We did it for so many years that we all have different things going on in our lives at the time, and it's really hard to be in a band, and my hat goes off to these bands that are still doing it, to be crammed in a van all the time. And we went through different members. Sometimes you'll see a band and they've had the same members forever, and it's like, that's rad. But sometimes you'll lose a drummer, or someone can't do it anymore, and you have to look, find someone new, and it gets to be hard. And I think we just kind of, it just fizzled out. And the important thing to me is that I get to talk to Danny still, and we talk about stuff. I appreciate our friendship.
Do you think you guys will do a show when shows are allowed again, just because the energy is going to be so crazy when you could see live music?
Well, to be honest, I would love to. I'm always up for it. I still play music. I do a couple projects. I'm in a band now called Beat Obsolete, where I sing, and we have one recording out on Bandcamp. I still play, and I also build instruments. I build guitars. If is it okay if I plug my stuff?
Yeah, I'm actually going to ask you. I ask you two questions at the end to plug, but
Okay.
if you want to,
Okay.
since we're going to
Yeah.
like probably wrap this up, we can just go from plugging that.
Yeah, I would like to say that I'm building guitars. It's called Koontz Guitars. You can check it out on Instagram. I'm working on a website right now. And if anyone's interested, you could just direct message me if you're interested in a guitar. I've been building for maybe like 5 or 6 years, but with this pandemic, I mean, there's not much to do. So I've been doing guitar repairs and just building guitars. It keeps me out of trouble. And I'm in my band called Beat Obsolete, which with a great group of guys down here in South Florida. And hopefully we'll get to play some shows when this whole pandemic thing is over.
Yeah, and everyone check it out. It's Koontz Guitars, Koontz Guitars on Instagram.
Yeah, thank you.
So you could see all the stuff there. I'm gonna put links in the show notes too to send people there. Cool, man. This is everything I wanted. I'm so excited.
I appreciate it. I'm so socially isolated, I'm not used to talking so fucking much. I'm like, my throat is like dry the whole time. I'm like, wow, I'm actually like socializing right now. Thanks for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, dude.
This is great.
All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up with one final question.
Yeah.
Then I'll let you go. So, what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
What scene ethics? Well, I definitely still hang on to that DIY ethic, especially with my guitar building and so forth. And I just be kind to each other. I think that's one of the most important things.